Joining me on the program now, geopolitical expert from the University of Otago, Geoffrey Miller. Geoffrey, kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Good morning, Andrew.
I mean, this is perhaps not unexpected, but still bad news. The ceasefire is off the table. The US and Israel blaming Hamas. And to be fair, one of the conditions of a ceasefire was the release of the remaining hostages. Is that the sticking point on this one, Geoffrey?
Well, it seems to be from the US perspective. Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's envoy, posted earlier today, Hamas does not appear to be coordinated or acting in good faith, and the US Israel have pulled out of the negotiations in Qatar. So the ceasefire talks have collapsed. The signs have not been great, to be fair, over the past few weeks, but there's always been a glimmer of hope that there would be a breakthrough at some point and we would have a circuit breaker in the tragedy that continues to unfold in Gaza with a ceasefire. But that hope is gone now for the time being.
Certainly, that all the
And
pressure has
cannot
got.
have talks if the parties are not there.
Exactly. Certainly, all the pressure has been on this week. Many countries around the world, including New Zealand, a joint statement calling for a ceasefire. New Zealand's involvement in this, statements made by our foreign minister and some debates in Parliament. Does that make a difference? Does New Zealand actually have an influence here, Geoffrey?
Look, words do matter in diplomacy, and they absolutely have their place. And New Zealand has issued many statements now since October the 7th, 2023. Many joint statements, statements on its own, statements of all kinds. Winston Peters, I think, is a great believer in joint statements, working together with others.
Yep.
At the same time, I do wonder whether it is enough. If I could just read the end of a statement Winston Peters, the Foreign Minister, made in Parliament
Yep.
on Tuesday, Andrew. He said New Zealand has always accepted that it has limited influence over the course of this generations-long conflict. The Middle East is a long way from New Zealand, but we can and must still do our part. New Zealand's mission has for decades been consistent. We want dialogue, we want diplomacy, we want negotiation, we want a two-state solution. There's a lot to agree with in what he says there. But I think where I perhaps part company with Mr. Peters is just on the way you do this. Signing up to another joint statement, he signed this statement along with 27 other foreign ministers, mainly European countries. I think Japan was on the list, Australia, so forth. This is useful, but these ceasefire talks have collapsed, and New Zealand calling for them to continue or whatever isn't actually
No.
helping. I think, in short, Andrew, New Zealand needs to become a lot more active in the peacemaking, the ceasefire, the negotiation process. And Winston Peters, I think, undersells himself. He's actually a very experienced foreign minister. He's been foreign minister now 3 times. New Zealand actually has some credibility in the Middle East with both sides. I think if Winston Peters did choose to get on a plane, go and start tackling the hard work of peacemaking, working in concert with others like Qatar, like the UAE, New Zealand's friends in the Gulf.
Yep.
I mean, look, Winston Peters likes to talk about New Zealand's good relationship with the United States. He met Marco Rubio in June. He met him in Washington in March. He has some connections there, and he could pull on all of those levers. Now, look, look, if we were honest about this, he probably will fail because
Yeah.
everyone else has failed up to this point. But I don't think that should stop you from trying. And perhaps, there does need to be some creative thinking after almost 2 years of war here. Perhaps Winston Peters could make a difference if he became more active, if New Zealand decided to become a little more active. And I think the statements just don't cut it anymore. And there's just not enough.
When the significance of this joint statement, though, there were so many countries, basically every viable Western power, apart from the United States, signed up to this. It's kind of like the United States and Israel against the world. This is certainly the way in which it's looking. And therein lies the problem, Geoffrey, because at the same time that we're making strong statements against Israel, many of these nations are also wanting to do trade deals with the US. It seems like diplomatically between a rock and a hard place.
Mm. And look, the United States is the key here. Robert Patman, of course, you speak to regularly as well. He gave a talk recently here in Dunedin on New Zealand's position in the Middle East, and he makes the point that the United States is supplying 4/5, 80% of the weapons to Israel.
Yeah.
So if Israel is not listening, I think if you follow the money or follow the weaponry here, the United States is the way to get Israel to listen. And if countries like New Zealand went to the United States and just said, this is completely intolerable, we are no longer going to work with you diplomatically on other matters because we are so upset and outraged about what's happening in Gaza, maybe that would also help to get the message through. I mean, you're dealing with the Donald Trump administration, which
Exactly.
is notoriously unpredictable,
Yeah.
and no one wants to put their head above the parapet because
Yeah.
they don't want to get hit with a 5,000% tariff or whatever.
Yeah.
But maybe if you have to try, and maybe you have to expose yourself to some risk. You know that this may see you get clobbered,
Yeah.
but if you work together, and this is the thing, if you work together, it's hard for Donald Trump to punish everyone. I mean, he might try. But if the entirety of the European Union, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Japan, if they all went to the United States and said, Israel is not listening to us, but you need to listen because the weapons and the suffering in Gaza, in large part, is also being caused by actions conducted by the United States. I think maybe the Trump administration might begin to understand what
Yeah.
the depth of feeling is. I mean, when it comes to the humanitarian situation, so much of what is happening at the moment comes back to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation,
Yeah.
which was set up in late May, which only has, I think, 4 distribution points for aid. And you're seeing this literal Hunger Games every day of men rushing to try and get food for their families and grabbing it off the back of trucks. And this is when you're having Israeli and possibly US contractors firing on them, where we've had around 1,000 deaths now of people just trying to get food for their families since May. It's absolutely intolerable.
No, it's a very serious situation indeed, and as we're talking, I suppose the question's about what next in this situation. The ceasefire talks are off. The joint statement seems to have had little effect. Give us some optimism in this space, Jeffrey. What would be the next best step from New Zealand or from our allies?
Well, look, my message would be we need to move from words to actions. And Winston Peters, he speaks very eloquently and very well. And I think there's absolutely a place for all of this. I mean, in the statement on Tuesday in Parliament, he said the international community is united in its revulsion to what is happening in Gaza. This horror must end. I don't disagree with any of these things that he's saying there.
Yeah.
But I just think you need to become more active and look at what constructive things you can do. And I think it has to be in the peacemaking. And that has to involve talking to all sides, including Israel, including the United States, including Hamas. So, I mean, some of the things I'm suggesting perhaps all a bit contradictory because going to the United States and saying we're going to boycott you, conduct a diplomatic boycott on the United States wouldn't really be gelling with that. So, there are different options and different views. But I think probably the best option of all would be to work constructively in these peace talks because the ceasefire talks, that's the only way to really lead to a sustainable breakthrough. The long term is that we need that two-state solution. We need a political solution, not a military one. But in the first instance, what we do need is a ceasefire. And New Zealand, I think, can play a more active role in all of that.
And hey, we certainly hope that is the case. There have been some, unfortunately, run out of time to get into the details of this, but there have been some indications of New Zealand's influence in that part of the world with a trade deal with UAE recently, as you mentioned. We have friends and partners in that part of the world. Maybe we should use our influence there. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your insight and analysis on this complex topic. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew. All the best.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the REMA studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.